has your agenda and also some notes that Bill has sent out. And so at the end of this meeting, there's going to be a lot of action from each one of you in municipal governance. So we want to make sure that if you have any questions during this process, that you answer those questions now so we can get that through. Sound good? And what
Right,
I'd
well,
like
I'm
to do.
gonna have to jump off at 4 o'clock, but I think that Jay will be on behalf of Route County.
Oh, thank you, Sonia. Appreciate that. Yeah, and so we're gonna get through a lot of detail. I think we're recording this yet, so we'll be able to go through this and pass this along to other councilmen or elected officials along the way. But the key for today is we just want to make sure that we clearly everybody understands what's required of their municipal governance to be able to get this required documentation for the statute for the RTA. And with that, I will hopefully everyone has their not only the agenda, but the additional key items that he had. Sorry, it doesn't show up there, or printed out or looked on your screen. But without further ado, I think, well, first of all, Bill, not everyone here has met you or Polly. And I think that it would be important for us to kind of stop for a moment and introduce them to the group. And I'll start a little bit for that. And just so you guys know what we've done, if you just recall, and some of you that may not have been part of the whole process, is that we first hired Bill Ray as our consultant to help us get the RTA to the ballot and what have you. And then we also have Polly Jensen and their firm with Kinsler.
Kaplan, Kirsch, and Rockwell.
Kaplan, Kirsch, thank you. We went through, we had a couple of attorneys, law firms that had given us a RFP regarding our fees and stuff we wanted to go through. And we selected Kaplan Kirsch, and they're on, they're hired. And so with that, we had them, Bill and Kaplan Kirsch has gone forward, really moving on getting what we need to do with this process. And so I see Mr. Kaplan's on there. He's with there. Polly is the kind of the lead attorney working through some of our RGA and our legal issues. We're very excited. I think we have a fantastic team that's experienced in getting the Eagle Valley over the line, as well as involvement in RTA and a lot of other transit RTAs. So I'm encouraged. I just know that our timeline, now that it's 2025, everyone here is going to need to know what's involved and what's on it. So as we go through this detailed questions today, it's really important that you think about it from your municipal governance, and please don't hesitate to stop, raise your hand, and we will get you guys answers at the end of this. So we have an hour and a half to go through, and we want to make sure that we go through what's required of us. Bill, do you see anything else we would like to do in this?
No, I think that's a great summary, Michael. How about I bring up at least the agenda to start so we can just review it with everyone, and then if we need to pull up other stuff, we can do it. But maybe it'd just be good to just remind everyone our key agenda items, and then we jump right into it.
Yeah. And I'll keep track of your the screens. So if someone raises their hand, just give me a few minutes. I'll acknowledge you, and then we'll go through it. But seriously, we want to ask questions to go through all this. So there we have our agenda. Posting location. What do you mean by that, Bill?
So I think we actually have to take an action, correct, Dan, to get to meet some open meetings laws for the process. So I would say that's our only actual maybe action item today, and then the rest is discussion on several topic areas.
Yes, Bill, that's correct. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dan Foote. I'm the city attorney with Steamboat Springs. And we have thought that it would be prudent for us to follow the open meetings law in conducting the formation committee meetings. And in order to do that, we have to designate a posting place for meeting notices. The city as the fiscal agent, has arranged to post those notices on its webpage or its website, and there's an RTA webpage on the city's website. And Bill, could you allow me to share? I have a motion that would designate the city's webpage as the posting place. And
You can share, Dan.
thanks. And then there's also a provision in here that if for some reason the websites are down, we could post at a physical location, City Steamboat Springs. And I want to make it clear that this motion designates the posting places that meet the minimum statutory requirements. I assume that most of your citizens are not used to looking at the city website for meeting information. And if your communities want to post meeting information on your own, however you want to do it, that's fine too. This is intended to meet the minimum statutory requirement. So with that being said, this is the motion that we're proposing, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it.
I'm going to pose one as kind of the facilitator. Dan, would you say that the motion, the second and the vote needs to come from folks representing their communities as an elected official?
Yes, this needs to be a vote and a motion's made by the members of the formation committee, not technical committee members or staff members or people who are just here observing.
Dan, this is Randy with the City of Craig. So basically with the bare minimum, that means it's only posted in Steamboat. We don't have to post it in Hayden, Craig, Oak Creek, anywhere else, right?
That's correct. We'll put it on our webpage and that satisfies the minimum statutory requirement. And if you want to do more, you can, but you don't have to.
Great, thanks.
I think it's fair to say that when we have something that we're going to publicly post, I will still share it with all the jurisdictions involved so that they can make their own decision on also posting. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that what this is mainly, it's just covering the statutory requirement for open meetings and making sure that we don't miss this one little technicality, which could mess up things. So, thank you, Dan. Can you, we'll talk later, but is this something we just need to get to each municipal governance and have them go through their city council and just do a quick motion?
No, I'm proposing that we do the motion right now with the members of the formation committee approving it, because the formation committee itself is the body that's making the designation of the posting place.
So it doesn't have to go back to each governing body. This is just something for us to move to.
Yes, please.
Yes, I get that. All right. Well, there you have it. First item of business is to make a motion to approve this as the meeting notices. I'd take a motion.
This is Randy with City of Craig. I'll make a motion that we have all our postings at the City of Steamboat Springs website.
Stacy Geilert from Town of Yampa, and I second that.
Fantastic. All right. Any discussion on that? Any more?
I would add that we also have a backup and we're designating 124 10th Street in Steamboat Springs as a physical posting place in the event the internet is down.
Yeah, as written, as we're all looking at the motion, I'm agreeing with that as well. All right. All in favor, please vote aye.
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 More importantly, any opposing? All right. I will take that as a motion passed. And I know Sonia jumped off for a moment, but she did send to go forward with that. All right. So meeting posted locations, we have a motion that's approved. Thank you very much, everybody. And I did jump in already to item number 2, which was the legal services RFP selection results. And I do want to take a moment and let Mr. Kaplan, if you would like to introduce yourself and what you guys been working on and just give you a few minutes.
Thank you. First, let me tell you how excited we are to be involved in this project. And I will introduce Holly Jessen, who has the heavy lifting here, as well as Kirsten Crawford, and they'll get to say a couple words in a minute. What I really want to let you know is some background about our firm, just so you have context. Our firm is based in Denver. We have offices in San Francisco, New York, and DC. We're small, but our primary client base is public entities. And that's kind of our specialty. And so we love to be a part of a team working with elected officials and appointed officials, city attorneys, and all of you. So it's something that we have been doing for over 20 years. And we're just, as I said, excited about hopefully helping you through this and helping you serve the people in your communities. So Polly, do you want to just say hello?
Yes, I'm Polly Jessen. Both Kirsten and I are Steve's partners. I'm also one of the founding partners of our firm and been working with Steve since 1997. It's been a few years. I was one of the kind of principal legal representatives in forming the Eagle Valley Transportation Authority. So I've been through this path or down this path before. And generally my expertise is in governance, in particular, have worked on the Convention Center Hotel and National Western authorities in Denver, Eagle Valley, obviously. And then other than that, I do a lot of work in development, in particular environmental and construction law associated with large development projects and transportation projects. So I'm really excited to be able to be part of this project too, and look forward to working with all of you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Kristen?
Hi, Kirsten Crawford.
Mhm.
I'm the newest member of Kaplan Kirsch. I joined the firm because of the expertise in the public sector experience. I've spent most of my career in the public sector in roles more like Dan's. Recently, the town attorney for Breckenridge, and prior to that, the lawyer for the Denver City Council. I am currently serving on some committees for the Colorado Association of Ski Towns, and focused on revenue generating state measures for statutory cities that need authorization from the state. And I will keep it short and just say that we recognize that this is a diverse group of towns and cities and counties, and understand that we want to try to serve all of you in your unique circumstances, and really excited to be part of the team.
Absolutely. It's important for you guys to know these faces and know these names. I think you're going to need, if you have questions along the way, we are going to try to come up with a proper process to ask questions. Obviously, our legal team is there that we've hired for us to get this project over the finish line. Each municipal government may have questions along the way that reflect just you. And we want you to have some freedoms to be able to reach out to these guys and ask them questions. However, we are being very conscious of our hourly rates and the time that are spent. In other words, if you ask questions that go down rabbit trails, we may not do that. So we want to make sure that we ask questions on the front end, that we're here in a group that everyone can ask, but we don't want to limit anyone from asking questions, and feel free to reach out to these guys via email and what have you. But just recognize the fact that we know that when there's a lot of municipal governance, that we don't want to send our legal team down rabbit trails that will cost us thousands and thousands of dollars. We want to talk about that here at this formation committee. Does that sound reasonable for everybody? Come on, give me some nods. All right. Bill, is that pretty accurate?
That sounds great. Thanks, Michael, for that.
Yeah, I just want to get on the front end of some things that we learned through the interview process. Also, some things that happened in the other governings of the formation committees from the other RTAs that started to get the price up a little higher. So we just want to make sure that we don't want to limit anyone from asking questions, but we do want to make sure we don't go down some crazy rabbit trails. Is that fair? Okay.
Yep. Thank you for that.
Kaplan Kirsch, welcome. We're glad to have you guys here. I'm really excited about it. I enjoyed going through the process and responding and getting some questions answered. So I'm glad you're here. And I was already glad to see that we have some work on the IGA and some other things in there to go through. The next item on the agenda is really to review our schedule before we get into some details on things. And so this is going to be where Bill takes over and talks about the key dates, and then we'll go into some public meeting dates that are required by statute. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Michael. And I really would like to invite Polly and Kirsten to jump in on this as well. We spent some time over the past week or so trying to update the calendar and keep this calendar as fresh and relevant as possible for the group. So I'm just going to highlight a few things. We've talked about this calendar quite a bit at the last meeting. But as we all know, we've got some important deadlines coming up here very quick. The most important one, but it's very manageable, is the January 23rd notice to DOLA and the Department of Revenue about our intentions to seek to create an RTA. It's pretty much a one-page letter. It needs to include the proposed boundaries of our RTA and our proposed funding sources. And then going forward, as we're working on this IGA, the intergovernmental agreement, we're going to have some public hearing requirements. So I'm going to let maybe our Kaplan Kirsch team jump in and talk about these dates that we've put in here. And then also the process to get review going with CDOT. So let me let you all jump in.
I think what we'll do is Kirsten will walk you through our date selection. With respect to our review of CDOT, I'll take just a moment to make a couple of remarks. We actually have review by CDOT and review by neighboring jurisdictions that, frankly, if they are allowed to take the full, or do in fact take the full time allotted by statute, are I guess, as you'd say, kind of long pole items to complete this formation process. One of the statutory requirements is that CDOT have an opportunity to approve or to review the approved IGA, and as do the neighboring jurisdictions, which would mean Moffat County, Jackson County, Grand County, Eagle County, and Rio Blanco County. So our objective here is to, they have 90 days to review, and if they see any impacts to their transportation systems, we have another 90 days to resolve those, either through an IGA or adjustments to our own IGA for the formation of the RTA. So when you see review by CDOT, and I think what's referenced here is the cure period on the statute, that's what we're talking about. Our reading of the statute would allow us to start and distribute that IGA for the formal start of that period once we have two jurisdictions who've approved it. So we'll be talking a little bit more about, which jurisdictions are really the two essential jurisdictions for approval. But we'll kick that off, and our objective really is to begin socializing what we're doing and identifying any particular issues very early in the process. And of course, with the nature of those issues and the impacts on adjacent communities will also be driven by exactly what elements we include in the kind of regional transportation plan the authority intends to finance and operate. So we'll be kind of have in the back of the mind, how we want to communicate and when we want to start communicating with this group of affected jurisdictions, CDOT and the adjacent counties. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, to Kirsten, to talk about how we're thinking about maneuvering through those initial approval process.
Thank you, Polly. I guess zooming out for 1 second, the RTA statute has some very specific timelines built in. And so working back from the election date that we are trying to hit, November 2025, we are then setting the schedule that incorporates from that election date backwards, the review by CDOT and the counties that border are there bordering entities to the service plan area, the public hearings, and then the notification dates. There's some more specifics built into the timeline, but that's how we set this schedule. There is some room to move dates as necessary. As a first starting point, Bill and I looked at your online schedules for each jurisdiction to see when your regular meetings were held and when the hearing dates were held on your normal regular schedule. But I'm sure there's modifications to the meeting times and some alterations that you may factor in. So when you look at how we've set these public hearings, you have to have 2 required by statute. We are proposing some dates, but you all will want to work with your staff to make sure you have a quorum on those dates, the timeline works for you. And then we have a requirement that 10 days prior to each hearing, at least 10 days prior to each hearing, that there needs to be a notification of the public hearing, which most of you this will not be new procedure for you. It's, built into everything that you do, but it's a little bit different timing wise on RTA. And I guess the really overriding end goal here is 2 approvals that need to go to the voters. The one is the approval of the formation of the RTA, but then there's also a potential second issue that you all may want to refer, which is whether there'll be some sort of tax increase funding. The RTA authorizes a variety of those. And so we're building this schedule. It's ambitious, but it can be done. But we want to make sure that we get going as soon as possible on the approvals related to the IGA and meet all of the other deadlines that occur in the schedule.
Kirsten, can you take a moment and give everyone an example of how simple these hearings are and what is the content of those? What are we trying to get out of that? Because
definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Bill and Polly have both gone through the process, but to put everyone's mind at ease, you conduct public hearings all the time. You know your community. You probably have a good read on what sort of people will be supporting or possibly opposing. And the idea is to get the stakeholder feedback, which you have to do in a variety of contexts, so that then you can take that feedback and incorporate where it makes sense into the IGA. And I believe Bill and Polly can speak to what there was an agenda the first time they went through the Eagle Valley RTA with a slide deck. Again, very similar to what you all do on a regular basis. Let me know if there's anything else to add, or Bill, Polly, if you want to provide some color there.
I mean, I guess the only color I would add is that our experience was that public comment did yield some, in most cases, not tremendously significant, but some tweaks and adjustments to the IGA that were, that we ended up rippling into the final IGA. And one of the things that we'll be thinking about and talking about is how best to craft your approvals to allow that, I'll say those adjustments as we go through these 2 public hearings to an approved IGA. There also were some issues that continued to be discussed up until the election filing deadlines that were, minor tweaks in how the transition of, for example, the Eagle Valley facilities, Eagle County facilities would be transferred over to the RTA. There were minor adjustments in particular revenue contributions and sharing provisions. Nothing that changed the overall structure of the IGA materially, but were tweaks to address different jurisdictional considerations along the way. And I think we have to just recognize that there may be some of that, or you may find yourself without, as many, I guess, issues that required some consideration. But in any event, there was, the public hearings yielded material input, and, we will be thinking about crafting resolutions that give some authority to accommodate those types of minor tweaks without having to go back to full approval and hearing processes.
Bill and Polly, can I just add one thing? Especially for the electeds. In Colorado, everybody wants to know, what is it we're going to get out of this? What service we're going to get? And what are the financing tools? And I think you're going to get some feedback on those. And this schedule is so compressed that those discussions may come ahead of when you're feeling like you're ready to have them, but you should expect to get good real public comment on them.
Well, and one thing to note, if you look at this schedule, if you look between April, May, June, July, there's not a whole lot in there. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, because what that's going to be is that's going to be a lot of our outreach that we're going to be able to go through, and each municipality may have different areas that you want to go talk to your community with. And so Bill and I, we've talked, they do some polling and some mailers and things like that. So all that's going to be happening during this time. So what's required is to have this public hearing on the front end, and it will probably open up a can of worms in different areas for different communities that you'll need to address independently. But the goal is I want to make sure that we start early enough that we bring up some of these objections, so that at least down the road, we're at least knowing, Oak Creek may have different concerns than Hayden. And so this is going to allow us to kind of get this kind of bubbling to the top, and it's required by statute. And so then we'll start moving forward with, as we do our formation.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any questions right now regarding, I want to get to some other points that we're going to go through today, but on this schedule, Bill, I haven't seen this in my inbox yet. I don't know if we want to try to give everybody like every 2 weeks kind of an update just to remind us, or print this out at least once so we kind of go back and refer to it. More specifically, it's the things at the election and below, to that July 15th, August 26th, and September. Those are kind of important dates to remember as we move forward. So the rest of this will fill in. But I think what we wanted to do today is to let everyone know these are specific statutes that we have to accomplish. And so outside of that, we can have many public hearings. You can do town halls, whatever each municipal government wants to do. But this is kind of for the formation committee to follow the statute and the rules. Is that pretty accurate?
Yes, these are statutory required deadlines, most of these, but you are correct, Michael. There is no limit on town halls, open houses, different public engagements. We're just charting right now the statutorily required pieces.
So just feel comfortable that we're not going to ram this down, and we're going to try to do big outreach here in Steamboat as well. And I think everyone will talk about that cumulatively as a group, but just recognize that that's what those open dates are between April, May, and June, is really to help us market the RTA. And we'll plan on getting this over the finish line. And it may just, we may not have some communities that need anything. These hearings in the front end will hopefully stir up some of the objections early. And we can start handling those things that we know. Maybe there's things that people bring up that I never considered. And so we want to bring that up. That's what this opportunity is. And it's required. Okay. Any questions on that? Hands up? Nobody? feel free to unmute yourself if you want to interrupt. It's a casual group.
Michael?
Yeah.
So in my list of to-dos I'm starting to put together from this meeting, I really do like that idea of a bi-weekly update on where we are with the schedule and the key dates and deliverables. So I will put that on my to-do is as part of some kind of communications with our groups. We'll have a schedule update every 2 weeks. at minimum.
And with that, everybody on this call, if you are doing something in your jurisdiction, just email Bill and he'll put it on the calendar. And if I want to drive down there or you guys want to come over, we can show up at these meetings. Let's let Bill be the conduit. And if you know of a date that you're going to do something in your community, make sure that he knows and we'll put it on this calendar. And every couple of weeks, we'll get an update. Sound fair?
Love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You want to go to item 4, Bill? Formation
Yes.
committee?
Yes, sir. I was going to bring up the agenda just to remind everyone where we're at.
Yep.
And I'll leave this to you and then our attorneys, this section.
Now, this the DOLA letter, is this the one the one pager that you drafted? You want to show it to everybody briefly? And the boundaries, I think we already have it done.
I will bring up the boundaries. I think the version of this letter I had shared was the version that Eagle Valley had sent out. We don't have, I believe, a draft of our own yet, but that's something that I'm sure Polly and her team will be able to put together very quick.
Can you and give people the context? It's simply a one-page document identifying the municipal governments and possible tax revenues or funding mechanisms that we can use. There's really 2 sheets of paper that fits this statute.
Yes, we're supposed to be providing the boundaries and the potential revenue sources 45 days before approval. And this is a preliminary notice to DOLA, and then DOLA at the end of the process, if the RTA is approved, will be the entity that principally administers the collection of revenues. You know, assuming that there is any tax revenue contributions. So it's purely a RTA statutory requirement, and we have interpreted its requirements for approval as very conservatively, to do this early in the process and to identify as many potential sources of revenue as the formation committee may be even remotely considering that are authorized by statute.
Thank you.
But let me jump in maybe and ask Polly to talk about a couple of things. On the sources of revenue, we don't have to be specific. We can just say the RTA formation committee is considering a sales tax.
Right.
We would just be very high level. We don't have to provide a mill amount or a sales tax amount or an estimate of the revenue generation.
That's correct.
That'll be later for our group, our committees to work on, is the actual amounts and those pieces. And then on the boundaries, maybe can you just go talk to the group? I put the map up, considerations for how we address Craig and being either contiguous or non-contiguous in this situation.
Yes, so unlike some of the other RTAs, you do have a non-contiguous participant in Craig, and that is possible to do. However, to the extent that you're offering systems that are outside the boundaries or of the RTA, you would have to have the approval of any jurisdiction you are crossing that isn't a member of the municipality, or if you wanted to tax outside the boundaries of the RTA. So the question was really, so do you have non-contiguous boundaries, or do you have, do you create some sort of flagpole boundary that connects Craig with the rest of the larger RTA boundary? And the main considerations there are really just the extent to which you may need to go back and forth with Moffat County for approvals. And I think that our conclusion was that one approval to include some property along essentially the right of way of Highway 40 within the boundaries would be preferable than to go back and forth for individual approvals to allow service or fund service that may be along that Highway 40 right of way. But I think the decision is it's a close call, and we could probably do it either way. And we can do pretty much as an RTA anything we want with the in that area between Craig and the greater boundary with the approval of Moffat County.
This is Randy with the City of Craig. I have a question with that. US 40, basically CDOT controls US 40 and on either a certain amount of right of way on either side. If the bus isn't stopping anywhere other than in Craig, why do you need to talk to Moffat County at all when it's CDOT controlled, not Moffat County controlled?
Only because you would presumably be providing service that passed through that area of Moffat County as part of your RTA.
Even if you're not making stops?
We could make a very kind of aggressive interpretation and go that way. I would say if the service is passing through Moffat County, I would probably just as a conservative measure request Moffat County approval for that extension of service across its territory.
Okay.
There would be no request for funding or anything like that. It would be a simple MOU or IGA that just acknowledges that. Is that correct, Polly?
Yes. And perhaps not even an MOU, just a resolution of approval from the county commission.
Cool. All right.
The Polly question on the letter to Dola and Dora. When I look at the one that was sent from EVTA, you're actually the person who transmitted it to those two state government agencies, but it was signed by Eagle County Commissioner Jeannie McQueenie. If memory serves right, the formation committee in Eagle Valley authorized Jeannie to sign that letter on behalf of all the entities involved. Is that your recollection, and is that what you would do here?
Yes, and that's what I'd recommend here. And Jeannie acted as the chair of that formation committee.
Okay.
So that might be you, Michael.
Yeah. Do we
is that an
do a formal
action?
motion sometime on that?
Right. Thanks, Michael. Sorry.
Yes, I was looking at our anticipated. I think that kind of goes to. We could do that now. We could do it at a subsequent meeting. We just need to hit our schedule.
Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Bill, this is Tom Leeson. Just a quick question. You had sent me an email, since we've got Peter Brixis and Randy Looper on the line, about who the best person at the county in Moffat County would be to sort of start having this conversation with. And I do not know the answer to that, but they might.
Yes, thanks for that, Tom. It was, just so the group knows, I had sent an email asking Tom if he had a recommendation for someone within Moffat County government for us to start having that conversation about a flagpole extension down US 40 or that resolution that Polly referenced from Moffat County as part of setting our boundaries. So it would be great if I could, get some direction on who to reach out to at Moffett County to start that conversation.
Peter, I'm not sure who you think. I would think you would start with Melody Villard, with Commissioner Villard. But
Yeah,
that,
Yeah, I
guess
would think that that's right. She's the Transportation Planning Region representative and she's working on Mountain Rail.
That's right.
The other person I might suggest is also Jeff Comstock, who kind of does quite a bit of work for the commissioners. They don't have a manager per se, but Jeff's probably the closest thing to it.
I work with Jeff Comstock on other issues, other clients, and I know him well, so I will just reach out to Jeff.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you very much.
That's easy.
All right.
Can
Let's
I?
round out. Let's get to kind of after the technical committee will address giving me the authority to sign for this formation committee or what have you. We'll have the discussion in a little bit. Let's keep going and asking more questions on these two letters. So again, it's the boundary and it's just a letter to DOLA identifying the jurisdictions and potential funding mechanisms. It's truly just a one-page document. And once we get that, everyone here on the group will see it and we'll approve it, and then we'll pass it forward to the when we need to have the date. I think that's on there in July. So, or no, sooner than that, in this month. Sorry, this month. So those two letters will be out this month so that we hit our statute. It really starts the clock on everything going. Are there any other questions regarding those two documents? All right, without further ado, feel free to interrupt me anytime, guys.
Yes.
RGA decision points.
Michael?
Yes,
Can
sir.
I jump in? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Bill.
Why don't we set, I think what we should do is working with Polly, maybe we set a deadline for a draft of that letter to go out to our formation. Well, I think everyone should get a copy of the draft, no matter if you're formation or technical, you should see it. So I think we should have a deadline. I think we should have a deadline to have that letter feedback and approval. But I think we're talking like within the next week. Expect to see a draft of that letter. And then we're going to have to get feedback and then do authorization to have Michael sign it and Polly to transmit it on our behalf.
So once you get this letter, just make sure you review it. It should be fairly simple, but feel free to reach out right away with any questions that you guys have on this letter.
Not to belabor it, but I'm throwing the Eagle County version up on the screen real quick.
No, I appreciate that. And it gave me a lot of context. So that's why I wanted to show it to the team.
So it was the same letter for both agencies. It's not two different letters. And I'm just going to scroll down. There's some statutory preamble. Then there was identifying the source of funding. So 4 things. You can see how general those were. Eagle County had taken a mill levy off the table right away as well. So that's something that you'll want to, that's a consideration you may want to take there. And then literally the letter gets signed. It's got the legal description of the boundary. It's very long for Eagle County because they made an artificial line across the county. We're not doing that. So our legal description is going to be far shorter. And then there was a map. And that's the substance of this letter.
Yep. So thank you. Yeah, it just gave me some context when I first saw it. I didn't know how extensive this is. Yep. This is a very simple announcement to DOLA that we're forming an RTA. Yep. So that's encouraging. All right.
Okay.
Any questions on that letter or what to expect? And again, this is going to come pretty fast to everybody, and we just need you to that. I don't want to say that not responding is an affirmative. I would really rather just say respond, even if it's like looks good, Hayden's for it. you know, something we need to do that. So we just want to get some approvals along the way to track that consent all the way through. All right. Thank you for breaking that up, Bill.
Yes,
It
sir.
is 3:45 and we want to go a little bit into this IGA decision points, and I'm going to let, I think, Kaplan Kirsch take over
Yes.
and let them share. I want to bring up that hopefully, or are you going to share that point, the draft letter you guys brought up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, Bill, do you mind putting this up for me? I can do it as well, but it's a little bit more awkward on my system.
Yes, I will share. Why don't you get started while I pull it up?
Okay. Everyone should have received a copy of the draft IGA yesterday. And what we did was just take an initial cut, largely based on the Eagle Valley approach to the basic requirements that we have to include in the IGA to move forward. And again, some of these may be ones that we can resolve today. Many of them are going to be ones that we can't. It's really just highlighting them for everyone's consideration. The list of these decision points is also included at the end of the agenda itself. So the very first thing that naturally we need to do is decide what we're going to call the authority. And you know, this actually could be a fairly simple discussion, or it might be something that, you know, I think Eagle Valley considered some kind of more interesting and exciting acronyms than just the Eagle Valley Transportation Authority. What I've included in the, if you go down, Bill, to Article 2, what I've included in here is the Yampa Valley Transportation Authority. But one of the things that we'll do is establish the name of the authority, the new RTA.
Real quick, just to jump in. This is, you know, this may be what it's called as part of the formation process, what people see on their ballot, what people see on their tax bill if there's a property tax. But just so you know, like Eagle Valley then rebranded into and now they go by Core Transit. So this doesn't lock you in this name forever. It's just kind of the government name.
Yes, or the official legal name. The next piece is the more complicated piece, which is what are the regional transportation systems to be provided? And if we, excuse me, Bill, I'm going to move this down just a little bit. In general, what we've done for purposes of the IGA is create a very broad purpose, which is to provide regional transportation systems as defined in the statute. And regional transportation systems are both the physical infrastructure associated with public transportation, the equipment, the rights of way, the funding mechanisms, the legal documents. It's kind of very broadly everything you need to do to provide regional transportation. However, we also approved a more specific list of types of transportation elements that were going to be provided by the agency or by the authority. And if you page down to, excuse me just a second, we have this issue addressed in a couple of different places in the IGA. One of those places is specific responsibilities in section 6.02. And in general, regional transportation authorities have a variety of statutory authorities. We allowed the RTA to exercise all those authorities and then broke down these specific responsibilities. There were a list of authorized transportation projects and service goals, and then a list of different I guess, areas of emphasis that the formation committee wanted to be sure that the authority was specifically focused on and addressing, such as transportation planning, demand management. You can see this list here. The body for purposes of local coordination, first and last mile solutions, different types of contract transit services. This is in particular is where we might provide the transfer over the Steamboat Springs transit system. And it also gave the authority the ability to provide local services to individual jurisdictions on a contract basis. There was some reference to some regional trails that were important to Eagle Valley. And we also have left in here some references to contract air services, because that may be a factor as you continue discussions. So what's included here is a wide range of different types of transportation services that you may want to consider or specifically identify in the IGA. So that's the second required element is, some sense of the transportation or systems to be provided.
Can I just jump in real quick, Polly? So it's in the Eagle Valley example, that work, that the kind of the recommendation on the regional transportation plan, which service goals or whatever semantics we want to use to call that, that was the work undertaken by the technical committee. And the technical committee worked on that and then made recommendations to the formation committee of what to approve. And then that went in as an appendix to the IGA. So that if we think of a division of labor, that would be kind of what the technical committee would be charged to work on if we follow the models of Eagle Valley. That's also how Gunnison did it, and SMART as well. Sorry, Sonia, I think I cut you off.
Oh, no, that's okay. I just didn't know if we were actually talking about some of these things now, or if you're just showing us what's in the document. And then secondly, I wasn't sure if everybody had been reviewing the documents that we got from Fair and Peers regarding how our community feels about some of these programs, and I'm specifically referring to air service, because I thought we were under the impression that we had removed that because of its lack of popularity within the community, documented by the Fair and Peers report and also the unsuccessful ballot measure of several years back.
Yeah, the answer is that this has been left in really as a straw approach for reaction and paring down. There was part of the reason we left air service in as well was because Fair and Peers seemed to indicate some concern about or desire to have better transportation to and from the airport. So it's really a placeholder for all airport related intersection with this, services provided through this authority.
Could I just suggest that we use the term ground transportation then for that piece of it? Because we really do use air service for subsidizing the airlines through the local marketing district.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
Sounds
agree.
good to me. Anything related to a minimum revenue guarantee, we'll take off the table.
Please do.
Got it. Yes, but as a general response, this is really just is intended to get everybody's thinking about what to include, what not to include, what some options for different language and approaches might be. And we should be digging into those and reacting to them for sure. The next kind of mandatory element of the IGA is the organization of the board of directors, which is in Article 3 of the document that we sent around as the first cut at the IGA. And this is a fairly straightforward approach, and it could be done in different ways. But It identifies the number of directors. In this example, there's a director and an alternate director who participates if the primary director can't participate from each of the member jurisdictions.
You want me at Article 5?
I'm looking at Article 3, Board of Directors.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. So we look at the number of directors. There's a statutory requirement that there be at least 5. And so there's a provision for appointing directors if for some reason there are less than 5 members. There is the manner of appointment, qualifications, and compensation. This particular approach contemplates appointment by the member jurisdictions. The directors by statute have to be elected officials of the member jurisdictions. It also contemplates that they would hold that position until replaced by their member bodies, or until they no longer hold elected office. So that's the term of office. There's provisions for filling vacancies, which is the same way that directors are originally appointed. The election was not to provide any compensation to the directors themselves. Then there also are requirements for voting and decision, which actually generated quite a bit of discussion with Eagle Valley. They decided that most decisions should be made by a 2/3 majority, except a few specific decisions that could be made by simple majority. The document defines a quorum for purposes of making decisions of, a majority in having a majority in attendance. And then the other requirement that was kind of an interesting one, that's an overlap between voting and other requirements, is the acceptance of new jurisdictions. And we'll get to that in just a minute. The IGA also has to identify and define the roles of the officers of the authority. Eagle Valley had a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. The chair and vice chair had to be members of the board. There was an executive director who could be an outside and was actually ended up being an employee or an employee of the authority. There were provisions for resignation and removal and replacement as well. So you'll see all of those roles and responsibilities laid out in the IGA as required. I think most of them, as we've included here, are fairly generic, nothing particularly unusual in any of those roles and responsibilities. There are provisions for the disposition and unwinding of the authority, as well as the term. This authority, or this IGA, contemplates a perpetual term unless determined by the members to wind it down. And when it's unwound, and it also can't be unwound if it has outstanding bonds. And that's consistent with statutory requirements. When it's unwound, essentially all of the member entities take back tax revenue they've contributed and facilities or other in-kind contributions to the authority. The IGA has to include the boundaries of the authority, which we talked about. And there are some rules for what the boundary can include or not include. I think the only question that was a little bit more subtle is the one we discussed about whether the boundaries needed to be contiguous or not. And they don't, in fact. You just simply have to have the approval of any jurisdiction where you include boundaries, that you don't include the entire jurisdiction. Then we talked about the term of the IGA, which is mandated, the termination, the provisions for amendment of the contract. And the amendment of the contract could only happen. This generated a lot of discussion. The intent was to avoid holdouts, but also to make it possible to or to require some sort of supermajority for amendment. This IGA requires approval of all of the members except one to amend the contract, the IGA. And in addition, interestingly, we have to have provisions for adding and removing members. And we required, while the statute itself would allow, once the RTA has been formed, the members to agree to admit new members. Eagle Valley decided that elections would be required both to remove and to admit new members. So let me just confirm. I think that covers all of the mandatory requirements except for two, and that, or actually one, which is the methods of funding. And this IGA includes a couple of different methods of funding. The options are noted in the margin notes that we've included: sales tax, property tax, visitor benefit tax, a vehicle registration fee, and then pledged revenues are always possible from public or private sources. So Eagle Valley, for example, did have some revenue pledged from Eagle County to the new RTA. And we had some provisions as part of their IGA that governed how that pledge would be made and what the terms of that pledge would be. So these are the kind of principal elements that have to be part of this document. Others are much more just standard IGA terms and provisions and are optional but recommended, I guess I'd say. So I think what our intent was, and Bill and Michael, please confirm, but I think our intent really was just to introduce what these principal decisions would be, kind of start some discussion. And, these will be the points that we'll be discussing until we're ready to take these to each individual jurisdiction for public comment and approval.
What would you like to see once we get, so what we're planning on getting is a little bit more formalized IGA that they can go to each one of the member jurisdictions to then let our council go through it and let us discuss it independently. And is this something we also want to bring up during those public hearings?
We absolutely need to be reviewing the terms that we take. In other words, the expectation is that when we go to public hearing, the formation committee should be comfortable with the terms that it's proposing. And, most of the I think most of the jurisdictions had already socialized the terms and worked with their governing bodies to make sure that their town councils and the commissioners were comfortable with the terms as they were presented for public comment. So that would be our objective between now and our timeline for initiating the public hearings, is to make sure that each of the governing bodies are comfortable with what's in the document.
Michael, can I just jump in?
Please do.
So when we had the public hearings, I did a lot of the presentations. I did most of them. And what we did was we created a PowerPoint that had some background on the RTA and the process, but then we had slides that went through the major points that Polly has highlighted. And so we didn't read the IGA. because we would have been there all night. We kind of had a slide about governance, slide about funding,
Right.
we hit the major things, made that presentation to a town council, for example, and then they moved to open it into a public hearing so the public could make comments if they wanted to make it. And that's how that worked.
Cool. So again, we got another 30 minutes. We still have some more work to go through, but are there any questions regarding what your responsibilities are when you get this and what's in it? This is the kind of content that we all are reading at the same time. We're all getting this kind of task at the same time. So we want to make sure that if you have any questions or some things come up in your jurisdictions, it's going to be a good conversation when you bring it back to the formation committee. So I just want to encourage everyone to take the time to review some of this. Polly, when do you think that we'll get something more formal for our legals?
And when you say more formal for legals, do you mean
well, what I'm looking at now has a few dates that need to be updated and some other things like that. I don't want people to pick apart grammar and stuff like that. But when we're talking about, how do we go about formalizing this document? What are you going to need from each one of us?
So what I would suggest is there are, as you'll see, some, for example, we'll need input to decide what we're going to identify as our baseline funding, just looking at the screen in front of us. I think what would be, and what I would expect is that probably at or before our next meeting, we would ask that everybody review what's here, identify issues, input, questions, and specific revisions or proposals for discussion. And we just circulate them back to Bill and us. We'll kind of consolidate that for purposes of the next agenda and just talk through, those specific revisions, general concepts and questions. And then after that next meeting, circulate a new draft that incorporates that discussion.
And that will allow us to have a little deeper dive at the next meeting that we get together to kind of coalesce what everyone's, the consensus of what everyone's put together. So we don't want to we don't want to dig deep today, but we want to go through and realize these are what's expected of us very shortly.
I was just going to jump in real quick. Bill, do you want to go first?
Go, please, Kirsten.
Well, I just think there's two things here. Just my impression is it looks like a lot to digest, and these are some significant issues. And so, we want to provide you with something to meet all of our timeframes, but also understand that you will have a lot to think about. It might be helpful, Polly, if we summarized, here's the things that are just mandated by statute, and here's the areas where there's some discretion. And they're really going to fall into three buckets, which is what do you want to do? How are you going to fund it? And then the corporate structure, which is, the seating of the appointees and things like that, which is also has some significant decision points. But I think maybe if we summarize this document, it might be helpful to digest.
A punch list.
Yeah, punch list.
What we got to get done.
Yeah.
Because if I had to read the whole IGA and react, I think my eyes would spin a bit.
Yeah, no. And I don't disagree. We do have a punch list of the decisions that have to be made that's part of the agenda. And so I would refer everybody to that list. One thing that we could do in between now and then is just put this into a format where you can see what the existing draft has and what I just reviewed for reference. I think, for example, there may be one thing I would recommend everybody read are the recitals. It's the story we're telling about the reason for the IGA, and it's something that will be, it has optical significance for presumably for all of the participating, entity or communities, that you'll want to make sure is says what you want to say around the way you want to say it to your constituents. And other than that, I think that we can take a minute and use the punch list that's part of the agenda and give you, kind of a quick summary of what this document includes for an easier reaction and read.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull that punch list up and put it on the screen.
Yeah, I think if you just scroll to the last page of the agenda, Bill, that's where it is.
Yeah, it has it on there. Again, as we move forward a little bit, as you bring that up, the authorization to begin formal CDOT coordination, what do you need there?
I think all we'd like to do there is make sure we do a lot of work with CDOT, and one of our concerns is that the timeline that's allowed for CDOT under the statute isn't actually what it takes to get CDOT sign off on our agreement. So I think what we'd like there is just a nod from the formation committee to start talking to our CDOT contacts and have them briefed on the timeline, the process, and identify some of the issues we should be sensitive to.
I would assume that's your role more than authority.
Yeah. Well, I think that, the question is, are you comfortable having us kind of begin that process now and having it be us? And if you are, and if there's anybody else who would like to be, kind of participating directly in those conversations, we would welcome that.
It sounded like Steamboat's transit manager might be on
Right.
this meeting too. Jonathan Flint, I have heard come up a couple times. I don't know if he's on, but that would be someone we would want to coordinate with, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds good. All right. Any more discussion on the IGA and what's expected of us and what you're going to get? Any questions or concerns or I want to make sure everyone fully understands. Okay. Discuss future meeting dates and times.
Can I jump in on that, Michael?
Please do.
So, as you all have heard, we got a lot to do in a short time frame and a lot of questions that we have to resolve on the IGA. So please, Polly, Kirsten, jump in. We need to set a meeting cadence for the formation group. I'm probably going to say we need to get together again in January for sure. In maybe 2 weeks, maybe, I don't know if we want, please, Polly and Kirsten, let me know your thoughts. Should we be ambitious and try and meet every 2 weeks as the formation committee? If it's at least for an hour to go through the punch list with the group. And if that's the case, I just want everyone to kind of know that would be the expectation. I will send out a doodle poll. We'll try and facilitate a set meeting time, but that's kind of what's ahead. So I open that back up for conversation and discussion.
Would it be wise to have this like a standing every 2 week meeting, but when we get through April, May, we may or may not need to get together? What was your experience in your previous RTA formations?
Correct. There was a point where we were back to monthly meetings, and then as we got close to ballot referral, we had to step it back up again.
Right. And I think that it's better to be aggressive and clear time on people's calendars when we know we're digging into some of these, that's a fairly substantial list of issues. It may be that we resolve them quickly, but it's good to have the time reserved in case there's a lot of discussion required on some of these points.
The other option I would throw out is we find a time in the coming few weeks or 3 to 4 weeks, where we do an in-person meeting, and maybe it's not a retreat, but it's a little longer, and we can also just bang through a lot of this stuff. So there's, we can kind of meet in short blasts over a longer time, or we could also try and have a really concentrated, focused opportunity to get through a lot of these items as well.
Yeah, my tendency would want to, let's get this IGA out, let's get some responses back, let's get these first papers in, and then maybe schedule something end of the month or 1st of February to kind of go over, unless it would be easier to get all these things punched out sooner rather than later. Sooner rather than later is going to get my vote every time. Because we're going to need the time, guys.
Yeah.
Thoughts?
Any, yeah, thoughts from our formation committee members? I want to facilitate what works best for you all.
Yeah.
I would prefer a longer getting it done than trying to set up something every 2 weeks that could make sure it works with me. I mean, whatever it takes, I'm willing to do. It's just, I agree with Michael. I'd rather get it done and move forward than to do a little bit here and then a little bit there and then a little bit again.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think a 2-week cadence is appropriate unless we decide. What I'm trying to say is, I'd rather do that and then back it off, just to make sure we have enough time to get everything done and just keep the ball rolling on here. So,
okay. Yeah, okay, Bill. Let's not make a formal decision just yet, but let's get a doodle poll and let's talk about it offline. Sound fair?
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
All right, but I appreciate the feedback, Ryan and Melissa, Miss Dobbins. I don't know if you participate either way. I mean,
yep, I'm here.
so we'll try to do something there as well.
Yeah.
Okay, let's jump. We got about 15 minutes. Technical committee. Discuss the work needed to establish the scope of regional transportation. Bill, give us a context of that.
Yeah. So as we kind of I brought up earlier in the Eagle Valley example and the Gunnison Valley examples, there was a technical committee that was made up of town managers, existing transit managers, and other. We had folks from Vale and Beaver Creek, for example, and the Chamber of Commerce, kind of those who represented the jurisdictions, the major employers, the business community, the workforce, and they made up a technical committee, and their charge was really to sit and look at all the materials around what could be in a transportation plan and to try and cobble together what was called the regional transportation plan. And that plan can be as specific or aspirational, as open-ended as you want, or as specific or somewhere kind of bridging the gap between the two. We clearly, we have a Fair and Peers report. It's a great start. Fair and Peers is part of our team, but I think we're going to have to start to focus and bring some focus. And with that focus comes cost estimates. So that will help inform us on the other issue that needs to go into the IGA, which is potential funding and funding sources and levels. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg. We can't really necessarily fill in the blanks in the IGA on how much money we need to get started until we know what we want to provide as far as service, or tell the public we want to provide. So, and Jason, please jump in as well, but that is what we envision as the work for the technical committee. And likewise, we'd like to get, and so I'd like to tell everyone, look for a doodle poll and communications from me if you've been identified as a technical committee member, because we need to get started on that work as well. The good thing is, statutorily, I don't think that we're under the same time constraints, in that at Eagle Valley, we were doing that work up until August, figuring all that out. The IGA just needs to have placeholders for that kind of stuff as we work on it. And Polly, correct me if I'm wrong, but those are things we're going to be working on. It's going to be fluid, but we got to get going.
Yeah, I mean, we'll need to include enough in our initial IGA, which we did in Eagle Valley also, to let our neighboring jurisdictions and CDOT have the gist of what we're anticipating. So, our understanding is that, sort of at the core and it is a bus route that will connect Steamboat and Craig. So, we'll want to be sure that we have the essential elements outlined for purposes of our scope that we're providing in the IGA itself. The details of that and more specific elements we worked on continuously. And in particular, funding mechanisms and funding amounts were ones that we were really jiggering along the way
Right
to
to
make
the
sure that, because it was a much more, what I want to say, detail oriented and we needed a lot of input from the local jurisdictions on tax revenue and estimates from fair and peers. And so those details we worked on for a long time, but we did have some rough outlines that we'll need to establish, at least so we can get comment.
And Holly and Bill, at some point, you've also got to hone in on the ballot questions.
Yeah. And these other issues are obviously have to be part of the ballot issue. And
Exactly. Yeah.
we fine-tuned up
They're
at the end.
they're kind of the foundation for the ballot question.
And as we saw during our RTA study, that package of projects is really important because we work to craft that to have it be essentially a sellable package to the voters. So
Yeah.
So I just really wanted to put out to the folks who are on this Zoom that we've identified as members of the technical committee. That's what's ahead for us. And so look for me to start coordinating and jump starting that work as well. So Michael, that's all I really have on that today.
Yeah, and just recognize when those technical committee get together, are we invited or
Yes,
right?
you will always be invited. You will
So-
not be required.
So just let you guys know that's on here. The more as you as an elected official are informed and involved in the process, you're going to be the point person for your jurisdiction, right? And so anytime we can get more product knowledge of what's going on, discussions overall, when you're that point person, people are going to ask you that question and you can be the conduit. And so I would like to encourage you, it's not required, but if there's some meetings that we can attend, it may be a little larger, that, we'll try to tend to let the technical group make their meeting, but we may just be a silent fly on the wall. But the information, the discussion may be very helpful for all of us. So don't think the technical committee is where you're not invited. I want you all to know that you are invited, but it's not something that we're going to dive deep in. It's more of a product information for you to kind of see where the discussion is. And I think that would help everyone kind of be part of that.
Future formation committee meetings, an agenda item will be a report up from the technical committee as well, which I will facilitate.
Yeah, we'll be getting reports that come up on these key points. And Bill, this is why we hired you, my friend. You're the glue to keep this all together. But we do know, and I just, as an elected myself, I just want to make sure that when you're trying to go out there and be the marketing of this thing, we're the start of this. And we need to make sure that we are informed and we have the information. And if you need more, call each one of us. Let's all work together to help get this over the finish line. And really, that's the team effort that I'm trying to make sure we create. But please, if you're not, the reason why you're on this formation committee is because you're committing to helping this whole process. And the technical committee is important, but what we really want is the staff and those on the technical side to bring up things that I would never bring up, right? And that's the kind of thing where it comes to funding, what kind of bus stops and things like that. They're going to have those kind of questions that we need to talk globally and see how that has to be enter in the ballot language. So I want to encourage everyone to just be, stay involved, but don't feel like you have to be there. Don't be the one that says, well, I can't make that meeting. Then you're not going to be there. you know, you're gonna miss that tech meeting. But if you can make it, make it. That's all I wanted to say. All right, 4:25. I know some of us have council meetings here in a half hour. Is there anything, we're gonna do a doodle poll on the dates for the technical committee, or at least Bill's gonna put that out. And that'll finish the agenda item, has 2 items, which is upcoming meeting calendar to be determined. So that's kind of on there. Is there any, we've got about another 5 minutes. Does anyone have any kind of general questions about the entire last hour and 25 minutes that you didn't get a chance to ask? And now's the time to kind of say, oh, when we talked about this, I'd like to ask that question. Anybody that's been silent? Come on. Ms. Dobbins, do you have any questions? Yeah. All right, you guys, I just want to make sure that you have the opportunities. Yeah,
It's Stacy
go ahead,
from
Stacey.
County Yampa. Hi, Bill. I
Hey.
was just wondering, when we get ready to do our meetings in March, if you are going to be available by Zoom and be able to answer any of those questions, you and or Michael. Because I know the town of Yampa has struggled a little bit with this, as Michael can attest. We've had a few conversations back and forth. And I just feel like if we have somebody that's actually done this before and can answer the questions that are going to be asked, that there's somebody there that can answer those.
So as much as possible, by weather, snow, ice, I want to be there in person, actually.
Okay, that would be
You're
fabulous.
entrusting me to help you through this process. And honestly, I want to start meeting y'all in person and being present. So, because there's a lot of trust that will go in from your community, that you're doing the right thing by leading your community through this process. So, as much as I can be, I want to be there and be part of making these presentations.
Well, wear tall boots and you should be good.
I love snow, so
Oh, I
it's
love
all
you. Thanks,
good.
Stacy. And thank you, Stacy. I will try to be there as well. 'Cause I'd
Michael?
like to represent this, so I'm going to, when you get that date scheduled, I will put it in my calendar and every other calendar I have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for saying something, Stacy. Is there anything else?
Michael, I had a question. And maybe it's more for Bill. Do you have at this point, and maybe it's a little bit premature, but like data sets or research about like how SST is serving the public now? Like what percentage of traffic would be like to remove from the highway? Like what are some of the goals that are trying to be achieved? I think it'll maybe be easier. And obviously it's about formation of the RTA, but like what will it do? I think will continue to be a question that's going to burden us through this process. So like if that data exists now, that'd be really cool to have access to it. Or like will that be created throughout this process as it moves towards the ballot?
Jason, are you still on?
Mhm. Yeah, I think we should
Yeah.
get Jason to send out the report once again to this whole formation committee.
Yeah.
And we can have his report. But
Yeah.
Jason, do you want to respond to some additional info that we have?
Yeah, I don't have answers, right at my fingertips, but we did a review of the existing regional route. Some of that ridership data is now a little bit out of date by about a year. Jonathan and I could coordinate on filling in more recent performance data, but we certainly know the current impact of the service and did some projections on ridership for, what it would look like with significant additional investment through the RTA funding. So, yeah, that's pretty straightforward. So I think that's definitely work that we can do going forward here.
And
but happy to send that report out because that'll be helpful.
Please.
And as we get stuff like that out, and then as we do some polling and find out how people react to the messaging and how we should fine tune the messaging, we're part of this process is public engagement and taking that information that we know the public wants to know and responds to. And then we're talking social media, infographics, maybe mailers, earned media, newspaper article or whatever we can do to get the word out so that we're informing the community on the benefits of the RTA.
Yep. Okay, 4:30. Everybody, thank you for your time. I hope you've got a lot of good information to take back. We're on it. This is the team that we have to get this RTA over the finish line. So thank you everyone for being here, being part of this groundbreaking event for Yampa Valley for decades and decades to come. So just thank you and be part of it. So I really appreciate it. And I'm just going to call the meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everybody. And feel free to call me if you have any questions.
Thank you all.
Thank you for your leadership, Michael.
Appreciate it, Michael.
You rule. See you guys.